Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 612. It's the pre-show for October 9th, 2017. This is this marvelous time of the show where we share really boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things. So as we were discussing, I had to double box a college football game Saturday night. And that went over about like a turd in the punch bowl. Excuse the expression.
Michigan. Who cares?
Bill, what are you eating there, man?
Dinner. Pizza. Hey, you ever had Davenport's Pizza in Birmingham, Dave?
Nope. That's the one in Mountain Brook?
Yeah, you got to have some Davenport's Pizza, man.
So it was Michigan and Michigan State. And
nobody cares.
You know, you figure that down here in this market, not that
people
many
actually cared, huh?
Watching.
I know. I saw some of them that did.
They well, see, you guys haven't seen the classic ones. I'd say I had more F-bombs with this one than any other one I've done over the years. And I've done a bunch of these over the years. And understand, you can't hurt my feelings because I have no feelings left. But it was pretty brutal. And, I always pick a choice hater and retweet them.
Yeah, I like that one.
And I couldn't pick I couldn't pick the good stuff, so I picked one of these goobers that came on Facebook, and it was like a homophobic thing and some other stuff, and I just of course, I had to blot out some of it, but yeah, and I feel so sorry. The bad part about this, I can handle it. I'm a big boy. In fact, I taunt him on the air. I said, bring me your best stuff. Just come on. But these poor little sweet young ladies that have to answer the phone in the newsroom, they have no idea what they're getting into, They pick up the phone, ABC 3340, thank you for calling. One of the young ladies came over, and her eyes were just glazed over. I mean, but it's life in the fast lane. I think there were actually some tornado warnings up north closer to that venue where they had to do the same thing, and they really took some heat. So anyway, but, hey,
you got better food than I did.
Well, we got some good food tonight. What did you have down there, Brian, on the Gulf Coast? Did you go to any of the seafood restaurants?
Oh, yeah, right. Like they were open.
Did you go to the coast, Brian?
I saw that picture of you having food there at the station, James.
Yes. I would say come on down, but I'm afraid it's too late. It's gone.
Yeah. Yes, Bill, I went to the coast. It was a fast trip, down one day, back the next.
I wanted to go.
Bill, you heard Brian poured out his heart and soul, and you didn't listen to his reports. What's the matter with you?
Don't worry, Bill. They weren't.
I was busy typing.
Yeah.
297,000 page views. Thank you very much.
So, somebody's feeding back here. One of our guests.
All right, I see Matt. I see Greg. I do not see Jonathan.
Hey, Matt, have you got any headphones?
I do not, actually.
Uh-oh.
Okay, often when you don't have headphones, that's when the feedback starts. You might need to mute when you're not talking. Okay. You can use the little cheap phone, iPhone or whatever headphones if you got any little earbuds or something. But we have learned over the years that for those that don't have headphones, the audio of the show kind of starts to feedback and it starts to get kind of funky.
Okay, I'll just mute it. I'm not talking.
Okay. So let's see here. It's 7 minutes before showtime and we're ready. Wow.
Well, we don't have Jonathan Kurtz still.
And we can't, for those that are guests here, we can't start until the bottom of the hour, like in 7 minutes, due to, we have to join television.
Rick, will you email Jonathan a link, the URL up there?
Do what now?
Say it again. Wait, hold on.
There we go. There's Jonathan. Okay, good.
Okay.
We're good. All right. I shall mute and eat pizza.
Well, We should make it a rule that you don't eat pizza on this show unless you send it to everybody on the WeatherBrains.
Okay, I'll mail it. You should have it by Thursday.
No, I'm stuffed, man. I'm good here. So, Brian, what'd you have for dinner?
Cabbage and kielbasa.
That's a show. That's a show title. That's a show title right there.
There you go. So, what weather system did Kevin get at his station? Do you know?
I don't. Kevin sent us one of these mysterious notes, and usually he'll just say, "I'm out."
Yeah, but he said why?
But he said we have some type of new weather graphics system at his TV stations. So I don't know, and really, there's not that many choices left in the world today. You're either dealing with the weather company or Barron, and that's really about it. So. But he was very secretive. He didn't tell us. So
yeah, he didn't tell us.
We'll put our investigative team on it. So Brian. So for those that don't know, Brian went down to the Gulf Coast to cover Hurricane Nate, and that's about a 5-hour drive from where we are. And he went all the way down there on Saturday, then came all the way back Sunday and anchored the weather Sunday night. This man is a champion because if he didn't anchor that Sunday, see, and I was here. What happened? We got short-staffed, and it was just a bad situation. Typically, where we are, October is a very quiet month.
Not this year.
One of our Mets was out of town, and so we're short-staffed. So I came in and worked Saturday night, slept on the famous cot here for a couple hours, and then, did the Sunday morning, which started at 5 a.m. And I will admit, I was dragging, and Brian, on his way back, was chasing rain. And
I couldn't catch up with the daggum rain.
The man was kind enough to come all the way back in and anchor the weather segment Sunday night. So you, sir, get the Trooper of the Week award.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because, usually I kind of get renewed over the weekend and I'm kind of fresh on Monday, but it's been a rough series of weekends here. So I am dragging.
Yeah. When I was driving, especially when I got to Montgomery and took off on US 231, as I was driving with the trees on both sides of the highway, you know what I kept playing over in my mind is that YouTube video of that car that's driving down the road and the tree falls right in front of it and they crash into it. That's the only thing I could think about.
That would be special.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I would catch it on my dash cam too.
But anyway, after all this, I got home Sunday evening, and you know what I came home to?
A tree
on the house. That's always special. I was tired, and so I had to get my little peanut, sized chainsaw. I don't have a big one like macho men have. I need a big one. One of these days, I'm going to get me a macho man chainsaw, but started trying to chop this thing down. And man, that hardwood is like going through concrete. And thank the Lord, another guy came over with a big chainsaw, and we worked in the pouring rain for like 2 hours. This was a huge tree. And we're lucky. It didn't come through the house. A lot of people, it came through the house. Ours just kind of grazed the side. So we lost some gutters and there's some roof damage, but nothing like, some of this heavy stuff. But that was a 2-hour job with a chainsaw out in the rain. So
after sleeping.
After no sleep. So I was about ready to retire for a few hours after that. So fun with a chainsaw. That's another potential show title.
There you go. Show title.
Yeah. And you're supposed to mix. I'm not really a chainsaw guy, but you can't just put gas in those things. You have to mix some oil type, synthetic oil or something in there with it. It's like a 40-to-1 mix. And I'm thinking, I ain't got time for this. So I just pour a little bit of that oil in there, and I have no idea if I did it right. And then you got chain oil. You got to put oil over there where the chain is,
Yes.
And so
we'll have to get you one of those 18-inch chainsaws for Christmas.
Man, I need one of those big old suckers. When the other guy showed up, I will admit I had chainsaw envy. And that's another show title. See, we've already had like 5 show titles here. All right, we're about to hit television, and we can get this sucker started. Thank you all for bearing with us.
Show titles always come in the pre-show. You know that?
They do, and that's the problem is, most people listen to the audio version and they don't have no idea where the show title came from. Most people listen to this show to figure out what the show title is all about. We've learned that trick a long time ago. All right, we're coming up on the bottom here, and we'll hit the television side, and we'll get this sucker started.
I have to say, James, I'm still very impressed with Storm Surge. It's absolutely amazing because I sat there at the beach at Gulf Shores after the police allowed me to go around the barricades. And I'm always impressed with how the Gulf rises. It's just amazing.
Yeah, even for a one. And if you look down the line, and by the way, hello, welcome to our television viewers. We are in the pre-show here. This is WeatherBrains. You know what this is. It's Monday night, 8:30 Central. But you saw the video done in Biloxi.
Yes.
I mean, it was rough down there. All right, so let's get this thing started here. Let's get right down to business. People are ready. And by the way, I don't have a Professor Peters. Do we have one this week?
No, we don't have one tonight. I'm sorry.
I figured you were. We'll give you a pass this week, man.
Thank you. I appreciate
you
that.
deserve it. Yeah, we all deserve a pass after this week. All right, so here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 613. WeatherBrains is the weekly show all about what? What?
Isn't it 12?
Oh, it is 12. 612. Wow. I'm sitting there looking, not that anybody's counting, but I'm sitting there looking right down here at the number. It says 612, 612. Wow. 612 for October 9th. Can you tell we've had no sleep and we're slightly exhausted? But these are the best shows. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. Thank you, Brian, for correcting me. And I'm surprised you're awake after your wild weekend. For those that don't know, Brian took a wild trip to the coast, turned around and came right back and handled some weather. So you sir, had a busy weekend.
And managed not to get arrested in the curfew, to get across the bridge before they closed it at 45 miles an hour. Whew,
yes,
had some close calls.
That's the Intracoastal Waterway Bridge. Brian was in Gulf Shores, Alabama for the arrival of Hurricane Nate. And they closed the Intracoastal Waterway Bridge, and that's really the only way out of there if you're going northbound away or inbound, and they closed it at 45-mile-per-hour winds. So Brian was able to get the job done, and he came back. So you have recovered. Get any sleep here, Brian, today? You okay?
I slept in this morning. Believe it or not, I did not awake until 10:03 a.m.
Wow, 03. That sounds good. That sounds very appealing to me. I handle the thing here on the television side, and we were short-staffed, which it never fails when all this stuff starts to happen. You're always down a person, so we were down one, but we made it. We survived and had a big tree go down in our yard. But I look at all of these other images of trees right through houses and cars, and we're blessed. I mean, I can't gripe about gutters and a little bit of roof damage. We can get that taken care of. So we've got Aubrey Urbanowicz, the lovely, whose dew point this evening is probably at, 74, 75?
Because we're in the Shenandoah Valley where everything isn't quite as impressive, our dew point is actually only 67.
Wow.
That's still that's nasty.
Dew point that low.
But it is sticky, icky. I mean, it's just, I got fogged like at least the next 4 days.
Yeah, it's nasty. We're in the Nate left us a gift, and the gift is tropical rainforest weather. We saw some dew points nearing 80 down here today, and this is the middle of October. Just unbelievable. So just nasty.
I'm going to use my hair as the frizz meter in the next couple of days because it's already starting to curl. It started out straight today.
And that's a show title right there, Brian. That's one we can use.
Yeah.
And for some, I would use mine, Aubrey, but I've got a slight problem here. That's not working for me.
Yeah.
So we've got, let's say, Bill, I think you're going to bring in Rick, and Rick's going to bring in our guest. So Bill Murray, Bill, you stayed at home for this hurricane, did you not?
Yes, I was lucky to get home Friday night and blog the entire weekend. We had nearly 750,000 page views over the weekend, and we were covering every inch of the way. And this tropical soup that Nate has left us is I don't know. I don't ever remember it being this soggy. I know we have this kind of dew points in the summer, but it just feels soggier than normal.
Now, I know we'll get to this later during the weather roundup, but let me just ask everybody here, was Nate a hurricane at the time of landfall, yes or no?
I say no.
I don't think it was either.
I wasn't paying attention.
well, you're like slightly inland. I mean,
Well, and that's why I didn't really refer to it as Nate. I think I made a mention of it on Thursday, but I just kept saying tropical moisture because I didn't want people going, "Oh my God, a hurricane's headed our way. We're the cone." And it was just tropical rain. I think our gusts got to like 18 miles an hour. So I really did not make a mention of it.
Well, it's hard to find a reporting station that had hurricane force winds on right there in that area where the landfall occurred. So,
yeah.
and the guys at NHC will look at it, and but again, we had these doomsday, Twitter and Facebook guys, when this is rapid intensification, this is going to be a category 4 or 5. These morons at the Hurricane Center and the television, they have no idea what they're talking about. You must now be prepared for death, doom, and destruction. There was a lot of that going on, and people just couldn't understand. I don't know what they're thinking, but they just assume that every hurricane is going to go up to a category 4 or 5. Ooh, there's warm water in Little Shear. This is going up to a category 4. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot more to it than that. And goodness, but then again,
and every hurricane / tropical system is its own.
Yes. All right.
They all don't do the same thing. They all do. They march to their own drummer.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Rick, are you there? It looks like Rick,
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. I see you now. You're good. You're good to go. So, Rick, bring in our guests. I'm done ranting for the night.
All right. Well, I'm excited for this show. We kind of pulled everything together, Bill and I, when we were out at the NBA meeting, which, by the way, we'd be seeing fire and smoke if we were there at that hotel tonight. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures from Disneyland. We can talk about fires later. But and before I start, I do want to brag and say we currently have a dew point of 49 degrees in the northwest wind.
Oh, brother.
You're not bragging, you're gloating. You're gloating. That's not allowed.
Bragging. I'm doing it all. We don't get to brag very often. So there you go. All right. Down to business. All right. Up until just very recently, Matt Moreland was the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Key West, Florida. But even as we speak, well, he's not driving now, but he has been on his way to his new gig as MIC out at WFO San Diego. Quite a change. Matt Moreland started his weather service career in 1998 at WFO Houston, and he worked his way up to a forecaster position, then a senior forecaster. In 2011, Matt left to become a position called emergency response meteorologist at the Slidell or New Orleans WFO. And then Matt left there in 2015 to become the MIC at WFO Key West. Matt got his meteorology degree from the University of Oklahoma. No football comments, please. We don't have time. And so we'll just move right into it. Matt Moreland, welcome, and thank you so much for being on WeatherBrains tonight.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I am going to win the dew point contest because I'm currently in Palm Springs where the dew point is 12.
Wow.
There's a weird feeling, let me tell you.
You win.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
We give up.
Oh, rub it in.
All right, well, Matt, thanks for being here. And, I know Irma was not your first hurricane. In fact, you've been through some pretty big events during your career. Now, we've all heard of the Cantore effect, right? When people see Jim Cantore coming into town, they get nervous. My question is about the Moreland effect. Do the people of Southern California know about your history with hurricanes? And if so, how nervous are they going to be when you get there?
I'm sure they're going to be a little bit nervous. It's kind of crazy that, this was really my last month in the hurricane zone, after like 18 years, and I end up with a category 4. So oddly enough, in Southern California, there is a low risk of tropical storms or even a low-end hurricane. Tropical storms probably happen about once every 25 years, 30 years, where you'd actually get one that held together that long. So not too concerned about it, but, obviously it's something that you still have to look at over here.
Right. Well, we'll talk a little bit about in your history at Houston and at Slidell. You've been through some pretty big storms, right?
Yeah, so Houston, my most memorable events there, Hurricane Ike definitely tops the list. Ike, we were in, we actually had the eye wall come over the office. That was a Category 2. Big surge impacts from Ike. Most of the areas east of Galveston Bay, some areas had 15 to 20 feet of storm surge. We had Tropical Storm Allison when I was there, which of course was a big flood producer. Harvey just blew that one out of the water, of course. Harvey just impacted a whole lot more people, a whole lot more properties. And then Hurricane Rita, which was memorable because of the evacuation just being weeks after Katrina. A lot of Houston panicked, really, and you had about 3 million people that tried to leave in the middle of that storm, or prior to the impact. And then it ended up shifting a little bit east with the bulk of the impacts going into Louisiana. In Slidell, my most memorable event there was Hurricane Isaac. And Isaac was just barely a Category 1 at landfall, but produced massive surge because of its slow movement as it moved into Louisiana. And I was actually deployed at the state of Louisiana for that one. I could barely pronounce the rivers at the time, so I learned a lot. I was learning on the fly with that storm.
No doubt. Well, let's shift over to the Key West office, and I learned a lot about the Key West office just watching everything going on with Irma, and I've learned, and from talking to Jonathan and Greg after it really is a unique office in a lot of different ways. Kind of describe the county warning area that the Key West office covers and kind of the people that you serve there. It's not your typical Weather Service office, really.
Yeah, so the county warning area there is actually one half of a county, which is Monroe County. It covers all of the Keys. Now, if you actually travel down there, and especially do the drive from Miami all the way down, it's a long way. It's about 130 miles up to Miami. It takes about 4 hours on a good day. And it's really, you have a huge string of vulnerable islands that are all, at risk of both marine and tropical impacts. And our office there has a long history. We were actually one of the first original 24 or so Signal Corps offices dating all the way back to 1870. And there's, been some political history to it as well. Key West was one of the offices that was slated to close in the 90s. And it was actually a combination of both emergency management and the residents of the Keys that fought to keep the office there. And that's one of the reasons why you still have an office there today. And really, the number one reason being the threat of tropical cyclones. And because of the unique vulnerability of having, 100,000 people on this string of islands and only a 2-lane road to evacuate.
It's really amazing when you think about it, and the building itself. I mean, the actual WFO structure. If it's not the newest Weather Service office in the nation, it's one of the newest, I think. And the building's kind of unique because of where it's built and because of that vulnerability. It's a little bit different. Talk about how the building was designed to take a storm like Irma.
Yeah, so the building was open there in 2005, and it was at the tail end of 2 very active seasons. You all remember the 04 and 05 hurricane seasons and how impactful they were. During those 2 seasons combined, we had 9 storms hit the Keys. That office was opened in September 2005, about a month before Hurricane Wilma, which was the biggest impact of all of them. It's a Cat 5 certified building designed to withstand 3-second gusts exceeding 165 miles an hour. Within the building, we actually have a safe room that's designed for winds of 250 miles an hour. And Rick, I'm not sure I'm correct or not, but I believe that Norman is the only other office, the only other one of the Weather Service offices that has access to a safe room like that. I'm not 100% sure that's right, but
Yeah, I know several offices have safe rooms. I don't know the specs on them, but yeah, I would say there's not. I don't know if every office does not, honestly, but the few offices I've been in, I'm thinking of Little Rock and Jackson, and do have.
Birmingham has a safe room. I don't know what the specs. I mean, I helped oversee the construction, but I don't know what the specs are for the safe room. But it definitely has a safe room with a door that is certified to withstand small arms fire, according to the FBI.
That could come in handy.
So there actually is a number of offices then. So I was incorrect in that. But the office is designed there to withstand these major events. And the floor is elevated at 14.5 feet. So the Key West office is designed to be well above the surge impacts. And all throughout, obviously as we got with Hurricane Irma, as we got toward Friday and Saturday, remember the landfall was in the Keys with Sunday morning. We were, there's no doubt we were getting nervous about it, but not at any time did we anticipate surge impacting our facility. And we knew that the building would be well within the wind threshold as well. So, and that's, we were confident in the building holding up through the storm, and it did very well.
And that's good to hear. We're going to come back around to talking about a little bit some of that a little bit later on.
Hey, Rick,
yeah,
I have a question about that before you go on from the building.
Yes, go ahead.
The staff come there, but what about the staff's families? Do they actually is there room for them to come, or did they all have to evacuate?
So the staff's families are evacuated prior to the storm, and the evacuation was an early one, which was a good thing for this event.
Yes.
They kicked it off, really ahead of the normal time range that it would happen. So it started Wednesday night, but it was announced on Tuesday night. The families are evacuated, and they are reimbursed for the evacuations as well.
That's great. Good to know. Okay.
Yeah, great question. And that's all part of being prepared. And, in the Weather Service and all of us here are always preaching constantly about being prepared and having a plan. As you're looking at a Saturday, Sunday landfall and you're several days out, what kind of preparations are you making in an office when you think that this hurricane may be impacting you, say in 4, 5, 6, 7 days? What's going on in the office? What's going on with you as the MIC, and what kind of preparations are underway during that ramp up to the hurricane landfall?
Well, definitely, number one is it's all hands on deck. So we actually at Key West have a tropical emergency team, which is our management team, our observing program leader, our scheduler, and our union steward as well. We all, in our tropical focal point, we all got together. We actually had a meeting on Monday night, which was Labor Day night, and said, well, we got to get the schedule worked out, number one. And, we have to make sure we have enough coverage because you've got an increase in phone calls, a huge increase in media, especially for a place like Key West where we can have we go from very little media to the maximum level in a short amount of time with an event like this. Obviously, social media is a huge thing now. And then all of the tropical products, all of the different hazards that have to be put out. There's a lot in the gridded forecast, and there's a lot more products. And then, of course, most important, our briefings and with our core partners, all that we do with them as well. Another decision that we made is, we want to make sure our generator is properly fueled. A fully stocked Weather Service office generator can last about 2 weeks, even with a full office like that. So we wanted to make sure we were filled up there in the generators. We wanted to make sure the radar was in good shape because we knew the whole world would be watching our radar as the storm moved into the area. But another thing we decided was we wanted some extra help with this event. And that's where Greg and Jonathan come into the picture. And we actually flew them in, and we also flew in Mike Samuelson, he's an electronics technician from the Lubbock office that helped us out through the event as well, because we knew that this event we were going to need even more help, even from our full level.
And that's a great segue into, talking about the people that came to help. Now, you've got a whole staff of people there that live there. We're going to talk more about them in just a little bit, because not only are they working the hurricane, they're living with it and living with the aftermath. But I want to talk a little bit about Greg and Jonathan who came to help. I'll bring in Greg Hebner. Greg's a forecaster at WFO Corpus Christi. He's also worked at WFO Mount Holly. And Greg, am I correct? You were there for Sandy, right?
I was there for Sandy. That was probably my first big high-impact storm was Sandy back in 2012. So going on 5 years now since that happened.
Well, so we got a group of people here that have been affiliated with some big events, and Greg got his meteorology degree from Millersville University, and we'll also bring in Jonathan Kurtz. And I know more about Jonathan because I work with him. I'm proud to work with Jonathan. He's the forecaster at our office. He started in WFO Omaha, and then he moved to Springfield, where he was at that office during and after the Joplin tornado in 2011. He's been at our office since 2012, and he got his bachelor's from University of Nebraska and his master's from Creighton University. So, Jonathan, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So, Greg, before Irma, I mean, it's not like you were just sitting around twiddling your thumbs saying, gosh, I wish I could work a hurricane. You dealt with Harvey at your home office at Corpus Christi. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was tremendous. So basically had worked Harvey. I was dispatched to Victoria County and City EOC in Victoria, Texas. So actually I wasn't in the office during Harvey's landfall, but I was helping our core partners in Victoria make their determinations in terms of evacuations, and then obviously after Harvey made landfall, what kind of impacts it have on the rivers up there. So I was working closely with them, constantly communicating with the office back in Corpus Christi. Who, by the way, I got to shout out to them. They did a fantastic job with that storm, absolutely fantastic job, going from basically a TD to a Cat 4 within 40 hours. Tremendous work by that office down there. So I'm very proud to be part of that team. But then basically, once the cleanup started with Harvey, Southern Region Headquarters put out a call for volunteers to help the offices in Florida with Irma, and I put my name in the hat. I was thinking probably not going to select me because I was going through Harvey, but sure enough, Tuesday afternoon they said, okay, Greg, you're going to go to Key West, and you leave tomorrow morning. Had about 12 hours to say goodbye to my wife and kids, pack my bags, and get on a plane and head to Key West, and that's where I met John and hung out with Matt for the next 8 days. So.
Wow. So, and John, you had a similar story. I mean, it was not quite as windy and wet where you were deployed to help with Harvey, but you also worked Harvey, right? I mean, you were deployed to. We'll talk about what you did for Harvey.
Yeah, it's a little different. I wasn't deployed to an office, but the call came into the office. They needed people who had been to Southern Region Headquarters before. So luckily enough, I was able to volunteer, and you guys signed off on the papers, Rick. And so I drove down to Fort Worth, and I worked in our regional operations center for Southern Region, which basically helps coordinate all kinds of things. I kind of describe it as a catch-all for things from headquarters before it gets to the offices. So it's basically a collection of information. They also, though, deal with all the large-scale partners. So the Texas State Operations Center, and then FEMA 6. And towards the end of my time there, they sent me up the road back to Denton, Texas, and I worked at FEMA 6 for 2 days as the meteorologist in the FEMA 6 RRCC, which is their regional response coordination center, where I got to basically got a crash course in how FEMA actually allocates resources for an event as large as Harvey, and it was quite impressive. So yeah, it was started off to be 2 days just down at Southern Region, ended up being 7 full days down there in Fort Worth and Denton.
And then you came home from Harvey. You came back to Norman. How many nights did you sleep in your bed before we sent you out again?
I believe it was more than I think it was 4 nights. I think 5 nights. I'm not sure. I worked 3 normal forecast shifts, and then you came out in the ops area and said they're going to send you to Key West. My response was, "Excuse me."
Yeah, I wish I had a picture of your face, because we had kind of talked about you going back to the Rock, and when it said Florida, it was either going to be Jacksonville or Key West, and I said, "Have you ever been to Key West?" The look on your face was priceless. But you would go anywhere. I know you're dedicated, and so we appreciate you doing that. So you also, I guess that was a Tuesday afternoon when we kind of got that call, and Wednesday morning. Was it? I don't know, I may have the days wrong, but
No,
I mean, you were on a plane and flying to Florida the next morning.
Yeah, I think it was the same as Greg and Mike. So I think the three of us kind of all figured out where we were going pretty much the same time. And of course, I got to give props to our ASA Suzanne doing all the travel for us. My travel and my time card had to be a mess for the whole month of September. Of course,
I bet.
That's one thing you really don't think about until you're in an administrative position where you got to get paid for all of this, and part of it is being paid out of this pot of money and part out of another, and part from FEMA, and then all this overtime, and then travel, and exorbitant. Well, I don't want to say exorbitant. Never mind. Scratch that. Not going to get into all that. But there's just all kinds of odds and ends that go on with that. So, Jonathan, we'll come back to you in a second. Now, we're going to have a Harvey show next week where we're going to have Tom Johnstone and Jeff Evans on to talk about Harvey. But, Greg, I want to come back to you for a minute. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on? I heard some stories about your WCM and maybe other staff members. I mean, there were some pretty heroic efforts that went on when the eye passed over. Talk a little bit about that and what was going on with all these rescues taking place.
Yeah, correct. I mean, actually, you mentioned it. I'm still getting chills. It's been over a month now since it actually, happened. But again, I'm hearing it secondhand because again, I wasn't in the office, but hearing, what had happened, I completely believe, the actions that John Metz, the WCM in Corpus Christi took, saved hundreds of lives that night. So basically, as Harvey was heading up the Middle Texas coastline, it was, kind of slow in its progression. As it began to enter into Middle Texas, crossed over to the town of Rockport, Texas. And it's a pretty nice resort town, a couple tens of thousands of people who live there on an annual basis. It obviously surges during the summertime because of vacations. But basically, a lot of people had stayed behind to ride the storm out. And as the eye wall came over, all the homes people were staying in were heavily damaged. So during the eye wall itself, that hour and a half that we had, of clear skies, light winds, the emergency manager from Rockport, basically Aransas County, had called the office asking about timing of when the backside of the eye was going to come back over the city, because they had people who were coming out of their homes that basically had been destroyed or heavily damaged, looking for a safe haven, safe shelter to go to. And I think John took about 4 or 5 calls from the county emergency manager to get over 200 people to safety in that 60 to 90 minutes that they had before the backside of the eye wall came over. So, obviously tremendous work done by John, but also goes to the testament that the office was working as a well-oiled machine, because John was relying on the forecasters there who were watching the storm, who were timing it out as best as possible to relay information onto him so that he can provide that information on to the emergency managers of Aransas County or Rockport, Texas. So again, that's what I was told, and I completely believe, all that had happened that night was very, very true. So that's the kind of guy that John is, and the kind of office we have down there in Corpus Christi.
It's pretty amazing. Something you didn't really hear a lot about out there in the general media, but there's a lot of stories like that. So that's very cool. Well, Matt, let's come back to you. I mean, you've been working with since 2015, and now here comes Greg and John and the guy from Fort Worth whose name escapes me. I'm sorry. And here they come into the office. How do you incorporate 2 brand new people into the office, and how did you decide what they were going to be doing, and what did they do, and how did they supplement your staffing that you had in place?
Well, initially their role was going to be social media primarily, because Bill South, who is our basically our media focal point, our tropical focal point, who became a media star during this event, he was trying to, he was having to do a lot of the social media himself, and it was just becoming overwhelming. And so we initially put Greg on days and John on nights, with that as their primary role. But the role just transitioned based on where we were in the storm. I know Greg, with all of his tropical experience, ended up helping the office out a lot with even the hurricane local statement and the tabular, the zone by zone, tabular text product that we put out, all of the tropical grids, which by the way have to be updated 4 times a day. So it's basically a normal day at a weather office, you have 2 big forecast updates. In a tropical event, it's 4 big forecast updates. Obviously answering phones and radar, and I know Jonathan was there on the night shift when the eye wall was approaching, and he helped with a lot of the messaging for that, given his experience dealing with tornadoes and damaging straight line winds in Oklahoma and previous offices as well. Helped with a lot of the messaging, and I'm telling you, the messaging we had leading up to the arrival of that eye wall about 7 a.m. Sunday was just completely smooth. I mean, we started messaging that Saturday evening, and I think people that still had access to social media and whatnot, they were prepared for the arrival of that eye wall as we got into Sunday morning. So they both fit in perfectly. It was a great team environment. I had worked with Greg some before in previous projects. John, this was the first time I had met him, but they both did an amazing job. And then Mike Samuelson that came from Lubbock, we really only had one electronics specialist for the storm, and he was the second one that came in. And that, in many ways, that's the most important role in an office. You want to make sure you keep things running as long as you can. And our radar stayed up through the entire event. We just, eventually lost communications to it. But it stayed up, it sat in the eye wall for 2 hours. But we maintained full operations all the way through the peak of the storm. Now, what ends up happening is things begin to drop off after the storm. And that's because like cell towers have a short-lived battery backup, short-lived backup when the power goes out. And, we started to lose all of that as we got into Sunday afternoon as the storm was moving out of the area.
And that was one thing that was kind of surprising to some people is, you're watching the storm approach and you see the eye wall go across and the comms are still up. You're still getting, you guys are still tweeting, we're still seeing graphics, and we're still seeing like personal social media posts going out, and you're thinking, okay, everything's great. And then later on that morning, everything, you just went into blackout as far as comms go. And I think that made a lot of people nervous. You were still able to communicate, and there was a little bit of confusion on social media that day that you had lost all communications. That just wasn't true, right?
Yeah. So we lost cell service probably shortly after noon on Sunday, if I remember right. The storm was, the eye had already, moved north of the Keys, heading up toward Naples area and the lower part of the peninsula. But we did maintain, and we had satellite internet, and what happened was the wind knocked the satellite the wrong direction. And that's when we lost internet at the office. But we actually maintained 3 analog phone lines, and those never went down. One of them was our spotter line that we almost never used. One of them was our roams line where we keep, where we can log into the weather radio transmitters. And the other one was our conference room phone. All 3 of those lines stayed up, and as we got into Monday and Tuesday, we were able to use those phones to, call our family members. I was able to use that to call the regional office to give them updates on how the office was doing. But also it became a critical lifeline really for the whole island. We had really some of the only working phone lines on the island there for about 3 days. And City Hall in Key West is right across the street. And we had the mayor, the city manager, and a number of state, local, and federal agencies started coming over and participating in the conference calls at our office. And it became a twice daily ritual where they would just come over en masse from City Hall. Also, the airport manager at Key Western National he had no landlines or cell for several days. And our office became a hub of partner activity, and we ended up hosting these calls twice a day from over there.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. A lot of people don't realize that was going on. I mean, essentially had one of the only working phones, and you talk about that phone, and I know I posted a picture, and Jonathan's seen the picture. The day Jonathan called our office, I think it was a Monday morning, somebody answered the phone and said, "Hey, Jonathan's on the phone." And we put him on speaker, and there must have been 10 or 15 people gathered around the phone. It was like the son was calling home from the war or something, or calling from the moon. It was like, "Hey, it's Jonathan, he's alive." So it was, we were really glad you had that phone line for lots and lots of different reasons. So I'll throw this out to kind of Greg and John, and you guys can just talk about. I'll start with you, Jonathan. I know there's a lot of differences. If you live in Key West and you work at that office, that's your home, going through that storm is going to be a much different experience, obviously. But Jonathan, you going into that office and really not having a lot of tropical experience at all. I mean, what were some of the challenges that you had going into that office, kind of just being dropped in there and saying, "Hey, here you go. This is what you're going to be doing," and what were some of the things that worked out well?
I think for the most part, I mean, that was the first time I've ever been sent to an office before as like a person to help out, and I got to give credit to Matt and the entire staff there. Just made it really easy for Greg, and I think Greg can probably say the same thing. It really made it really easy for us to come in and just kind of become part of the team. I worked with some great forecasters on the midnight shift. Chip Casper, lead, and Sean Dida, and Chris Rothwell, and Adam Futterman. That's like Butterman, but with an F. Thanks, Greg. Melody Lovin, one of the new forecasters that's there. Stephen Chesser, the Met Tech. They're all great people. And so I think we just kind of meshed really well from the very start. And I mainly just tried to help out where I could. So my main goal was just go to Chip and as the shift supervisor and be like, "Hey, what do you need me to do? And what would you like me to do?" And then over time, just kind of, where I could jump in and help, I tried. And you don't want to step on anyone's toes, but at the same time, for me, it was just kind of a learning experience, but also trying to apply things that I've kind of picked up over the years and how I can help. So.
How about you, Greg? I mean, of course, you were a little bit different background, but what was the most challenging thing to you, and how did things go for you?
I think for me, it was tough because, having gone through Harvey, really 10 days prior, that was where I lived, where my family lived. And, seeing that thing blossom, hours before landfall, it hits you on a really visceral level. It becomes very emotional. You become obviously, your possessions, your life, is now in a possible, zone of complete destruction with a major storm like that. Before I left from my assignment in Victoria, I literally kissed my house goodbye because I could have sworn by that Monday morning I come back here, it wasn't going to be standing anymore. So having been through that with Harvey, when I traveled to Key West, I was disconnected because, obviously it's not where I live, but I could completely understand and empathize with the forecasters whose homes were now, in the possible destruction zone for Irma. So, if they needed, to talk, needed a shoulder to cry on, whatever they needed to get done, whatever they needed to do to feel better, I was there because, again, I had just gone through that. And I also want to make mention, too, that there's a forecaster in Key West. His name is Chris Rothwell. Actually was deployed to Corpus Christi to help us out in Harvey. Oh, wow. So when I went to Victoria, Texas, Chris came over to actually backfill my position in Corpus Christi. So he survived, that's not the best word, but he basically was part of both events, Harvey as well as Irma. So, but everyone's there for a reason. We signed up for this job, and we love what we do, and we're able to volunteer when asked to go into basically harm's way. Again, that could also be, your own possession, your own family. You could be put in harm's way too. So that's obviously in the back of your head too. So there's a lot going on. Again, it's a very emotional, thing. Physical, not so much, but it really is the emotional games that you play with yourselves, before and after the storms themselves. And it makes it tough. It really makes it really tough to, go from one environment to another. But again, having that experience with Harvey, I was able to, I think, seamlessly fit into that office in Key West.
Hey, Matt, this is Bill Murray. I was wondering sort of what the storm of record was or is to this day in Key West, and how did Irma compare to it statistically?
Well, I mean, there's a number of, if you just look at the Keys as a whole, there's a number of very, very memorable events. The one that's often referred to in Key West is the 1846 hurricane, which was one event where the eye went right over Key West. We had a number of them at the beginning of the 20th century, I believe 1906 and 1909, and we actually have a picture of our office at that time with damage around it from storms. Obviously, this was, the more recent storm of note in the Keys was Hurricane Wilma. Wilma was a very different storm from Irma. The track, the center passed basically about 60, 70, 80 miles west of Key West. It was a very, very large size storm. If you remember, at one point, Wilma had been the strongest on record in the Atlantic Basin. There was big storm surge impacts all throughout the Keys. This was a little bit different event in terms of where the track was. Put Key West on the left side of the system. But the wind impacts from Irma throughout the Keys were much higher than what we saw with Hurricane Wilma. How it shakes out damage-wise, I know in the Keys alone, Hurricane Wilma was in the billions, just in the Keys, and it remains to be seen how Irma is going to shake out there.
And in all of that, it seems to me, it strikes me very interestingly that some of these hurricanes have come in pairs to the Keys, because you mentioned the 1946 hurricane, and I think I read that there were 2 hurricanes that year that struck the lower Keys, and then again, I think in 1870 there were twin hurricanes in October. So it seems like when the pattern sets up, that Key West can find itself in the crosshairs from multiple storms.
Yeah, I know I believe it was the first decade of the 20th century. There were maybe 3, at least 2, maybe 3 that impacted the Keys during that period. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the 04-05 seasons combined, we had 9 named storms impact the Keys in about a 14-month period.
Wow.
One of those, which, I was at Houston for Hurricane Rita, but Rita was very close to being a huge disaster for the lower Keys. It was, as it was moving west across the Florida Straits, it was intensifying.
Mm-hmm.
The eye wall stayed just south of Key West, missed it by probably 20 or 30 miles. But just a slightly different track, and Rita would have been a big disaster in the lower Keys. So there, as many direct hits as you've had on the Keys, you have a lot of close calls as well. And climatologically, if you look at the entire Gulf and Atlantic coast, it's really South Florida and the Keys that have the highest risk of a hurricane impact.
So who was the famous emergency manager down there, Matt, for years that we always saw, the big character guy?
That was Billy Wagner, and he was actually
Wagner.
from Louisiana.
There you go.
That was one thing that was great about Billy, in my opinion. But he moved down to the Keys actually in the 70s, and he was instrumental as just being a true leader in the emergency management community, and really instrumental in helping to preserve the Key West office during that political battle. And that battle went on for, I think it was 1989 when it was announced that the office would close, and 1996 or 7 when it was finally, that was kind of lifted from the office. So it was a long, drawn-out battle that Billy and a lot of the political leadership in the Keys underwent for the office. And we actually went and saw Billy right after Irma. He did well. He lives over on Duck Key, which is east of Marathon, and actually had significant surge on the island there, and that was property that affected his basically his garage, his lowest level. But he held up well in the storm, and he still works very closely with emergency management throughout the state of Florida.
So Greg, is this single highway coming out of there has to just be a terrible nightmare for emergency managers and the weather service in terms of evacuation, because just one accident can take out the main evacuation route. Talk about that for a second. Preparations for that, what sort of contingencies are in place, et cetera.
You mean Matt or me?
I'm sorry. I'm kind of, you guys are just sort of a big universal group tonight. I do have some questions for you in just a second, Greg, but I guess I directed that at Matt. Sorry about
that. So the issue you have with US 1 and the Keys is it's only a one-lane highway. So really they can only use one lane for evacuations there. And that's because you have to keep a lane open for emergency management. So that's one of the big issues with the evacuation. And of course, the time window there. Typically, tourists go first. And I want to make a shout out to the Monroe County Tourist Development Council. So it's a very unique partnership between them and the Weather Service and county leadership as well, where the Tourist Development Council down there is plugged into the hurricane threat and keeping people up to date. So Florida as a whole, their view is they want everyone to remember having a great time. And they really don't want, the hotels running during a major event like that. So they actually put bulletins in each of the hotels with Weather Service information to keep tourists up to date. They're asked to leave first. It was a very organized evacuation and really honestly ahead of their time frame. And that's because of the track, because the forecast was so good with Irma, there's a lot of confidence and impacts in the Keys. So they triggered the evacuation Wednesday night, which the landfall was, Sunday morning, but it was actually announced on Tuesday night. So there was a lot of lead time in this event.
So Matt, you mentioned the role of the focal point. Talk about that role of the tropical focal point. What is their job? What do they do, and how important are they in the whole process?
It's a very important role. Essentially, that person has to keep up with all of the programmatic changes in the Weather Service from year to year. And there's been significant changes over the last few years with some of the new graphical products we put out. The storm surge watch warning, which this was the first one ever issued for the Keys. It's a brand new warning in the Weather Service. Also, the potential storm surge flooding map, where you can now get pretty specific storm-based probabilistic storm surge forecast information. And even the text products that we put out, even the watches and warnings, they change dramatically from year to year. So our focal point has to keep the office abreast of all of those changes. Also help to train all the meteorologists in the office on changes as well, and that happens every season. And Bill South, basically he was the top for the tropical program and then also for media. So he had a huge role in this event and did an amazing job.
And you mentioned one other person that was in the scheduling meeting that Monday night, and that's the shop steward for the union. Talk about how important that cooperation is when you get into an event like this that is anomalous and sort of off the scale.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very important, especially when it comes to things like, concerns about employee safety to the event, making sure we have enough supplies in the office, and also the reimbursement for all of the evacuations. So not only did we have families that evacuated, but we had several folks that were put up in hotels after the storm because they lost power or had damage at their homes. And there's a huge mountain of administrative work with that. And I want to give, I know we talked about the ASAs earlier, but Laura Casper, my administrative support assistant at Key West, she did an amazing job um, throughout the event. I mean, there were so many forms that we had to sign and so many submissions that we had to make for reimbursements. But having a good relationship with the steward is essential leading up to a big event, having that trust already there.
So we love coming to Key West, and we love the great hotels there. And I know from our association with Hilton that the Waldorf, one of the Waldorfs, is coming back online here in a couple of weeks. Talk about the recovery in the tourism assets, and because we want folks to come back to the Keys as soon as it's possible for them to have a good experience.
Yeah, well, I know, prior to the point where I left, I know that the tourism was already beginning to pick up pretty dramatically. The last weekend in September, it was, I would say, almost above normal level of folks in Key West. I think some of those were some of the snowbirds coming down to check on their properties to make sure everything was okay. Key West as a whole held up very well. Most of the island saw Category 1 type winds. The highest gust we recorded was 94 miles an hour at the airport. We may have seen some gusts around 100 in some spots, especially the eastern part of the island. But mostly it was, just trees down, fences down, things like that. The building codes are very strong by and large. I mean, it was interesting comparing the damage in Key West to what I saw in Houston after Hurricane Ike, because the winds were pretty similar, and there was a lot more roof damage in Houston in the same level of winds, and I think that's the building codes. And when I talk about it, I mean, as you get inland in Texas, away from the coastal counties. So I think the building codes, also helped out with the island as well. Now, obviously, as you don't have to go far up from Key West, up to Cudjoe Key, Ramrod, Big Pine Key, and up from there, the surge impacts were, they had 5 to 8 feet of inundation in that area, and the damage was obviously a lot more severe as you head up into the upper part of the lower Keys and the middle Keys. But as far as tourism, in Key West, September is kind of the low point of the year. It starts to pick up by late October. It's very much a winter and spring destination where it peaks, and they will be back as strong as ever, I think.
Rick, I think you wanted to ask a question. Then I've got a couple more I want to ask Jonathan and Greg.
Yeah, I guess you can't hear me when it's muted, so thanks.
That's the way that works, Rick.
Yeah, I'm learning. It's only been, 4 years, so I'm slow. I want to go back to Jonathan, because Jonathan and I and Greg too, I mean, first of all, how many times did you guys get to tell your story when you were at the NWA meeting? Like 2 or 3 times, maybe?
Oh, I think John was definitely the celebrity. Everyone knew John to begin with, so everyone came up and he had hordes of people all around him asking him how he survived Irma and Key West, and
he has that all the time. No, John, I was going to ask you. I know that, and I thought this was a really great idea that you guys are part of a group or a fraternity now of people that have done this, and in a way, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal to say, well, I'm a meteorologist for the Weather Service, just go work in this other office and do this. But as Greg mentioned, as you mentioned, it's not that easy. I mean, I'd be really nervous to have to go do that myself. But there's a whole group of people that have done that, and a bunch of them have done it this year. So Jonathan, you were working with some of those folks on maybe getting together and maybe putting something together for the AMS meeting in Austin in January. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Greg and I were approached by Katie LaBelle at Weather Service headquarters about putting together some kind of abstract. They've opened up abstract submissions for Irma, Harvey, and Maria. And Greg, I'm sure you looked at it too, but I was looking at the deployment pool list, and I think there's been over 50 people now have been deployed at various times this hurricane season. There were two or three people deployed to the San Juan office for Maria, forecaster from Little Rock, Charles Dalton, and a forecaster from the El Paso office, Hector Crespo. I mean, they had it probably the worst out of anyone that got deployed, having to go deal with Maria and what it did to the island. So yeah, we're still emailing Katie to kind of figure out how we want to move about that, because we want to make sure we bring up the fact that there was a lot of people that sacrificed quite a bit to go do this. And at the same time, like Greg said, I mean, you walk into an office that's not an office that you work at, and it takes you have to find a way to fit in as best you can and do the best job you possibly can. And I think it really it's a testament to the Key West office. They made it so easy for Greg and I to kind of walk in. So, but yeah, I'm not sure how far we're going to take it, but we're still talking with Katie about it and still trying to figure out how we want to move about with that. So.
I think that's so interesting. And yeah, and I think it does take a certain personality type. And I know both you and Greg have that personality. I mean, you can go in and you're very friendly and outgoing and not as introverted as some of us are. And
you're making me blush, Rick. Stop! You're making me blush.
But it's true. So I hope that goes through, because that'd be cool. I think that'd be a good story to tell, and it's something that's kind of unique. So, Bill, you had a couple more.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Greg. The Rockport area was obviously very heavily damaged. How's the recovery coming there? And have you sort of gotten some idea about what the winds were when the hurricane came inland that night?
Yeah, so recovery is still ongoing up there. I mean, there was, driving through there a couple days after I had gone through, I was doing some storm survey and surge assessments there. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. People's livelihoods, and their houses were gone. I mean, I've never seen devastation like that ever, from a storm. But recovery is going to take a long time up there, years. They're slowly getting back to normalcy. So some of the amenities, obviously water and power, have been back on for several weeks now. Grocery stores, are pushing products out. Restaurants are opening up again. So now that area relies heavily on tourism, and I really hope people come back stronger than ever to really support that community as best as possible. Really, from now on through the summer, the next couple of years, really, I think it's going to take a long time for them to really get back to where they were, pre-Harvey. So, as far as the winds go, I think we had some determination that we had wind gusts of 130 to 140 miles an hour coming through Rockport in general. Actually, on our homepage, on the Corpus Christi Weather Service homepage, there is a link to some of the graphics that we've created through GIS to determine where the strongest winds were. There also was a Doppler on wheels too, I believe, out there as well, and I think they had some reports of even higher wind gusts, instantaneous 1-second wind gusts of 140, 150 miles an hour possible, not too far from the Rockport Airport, which places communities on the back side of that airport, on the bay side of the airport, were the heaviest impacted, with the complete loss of structures back there. So that was basically ground zero for us as far as the winds go, was that Rockport peninsula.
So Greg, I understand that. Well, when you were in Key West for Irma, I imagine you had to be thankful that Cuba was kind of in the way of the hurricane, because things could have been a lot different if we hadn't had the significant land interaction that we had with the eye wall with the nation of Cuba.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So I mean, that definitely saved Key West quite a bit. But in the back of my mind, just having gone through Harvey, I just knew how bad it could really be, for that city, for that archipelago down there. I just knew. And, again, there are a couple of times I stepped away from my desk. I got a little emotional. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it happens because, you're so fully invested in what you're doing, but there's also that personal level too, being a human being, that, it really kind of, it cuts to your core. Seeing your coworkers possibly losing everything they have. It's awful. It's an awful feeling.
And I was talking to Trevor Boucher, and I understand that you guys, your office, I guess it's your office, maybe in San Antonio, where they were prepared to be a full backup for Key West. Is that right? Talk about how that works. Where they actually downloaded the entire office into the other weather service office.
Hey, Matt, how's the logistics for you, Matt? How about that? Jump in with that? GFE information?
Yeah, so I do want to definitely give kudos to Weather Service San Antonio. Not only did they take over, so they really are the ones that took over operations for us that Sunday as everything was going down. But they maintained operations for 5 or 6 days. And they had been working with, so their AWIPS focal point and IT and everything had been working with our office for days leading up to the event to make sure they were ready. And I mean, it was absolutely seamless transition, great communication with them as well. And that's, for them, that's the first time they've ever backed up. Normally our backups are pretty geographically close. Lessons learned over the last few years is sometimes that doesn't work when it's a hurricane.
Yeah.
Especially. So, this is an office that they don't normally back up, and they did a fantastic job.
So Jonathan, did you check the topo map for Key West before you told Rick that you would go?
I did not check the topo.
So talk about the office there, and because you had to, I guess, get picked up at the airport or drive in with a rental car or whatever. And
actually, a fun story. All that was left was a 12-passenger van from Budget Rental Car. So I was going to again. We talk about our administrative support assistant, but Suzanne tried to work so hard to find me a rental car. I actually ended up waiting for Greg and Mike. They came in on a later flight. And so the three of us became the 3 best friends that anyone's ever had. Went to Publix and then went to the office to meet Matt and the staff. The office there, I mean, it's just like a staff, like a normal forecast office, 5 senior forecasters, 5 forecasters, 3 med interns or HMTs, whichever you want to call them, position now. But yeah, they were just, I mean, I worked the night shift and worked with the same group of folks every night through landfall. And I mentioned them earlier, but they were all terrific. But kind of back to what Greg said, I mean, you're coming to an office that's not your own. And I think the toughest thing for me was listening to my coworkers basically say things like, I'm going to lose my house, or my house is going to have 4 feet of water in it. And they know this before it ever happens. Mm-hmm. I had a really interesting conversation with Chris Rothwell and Sean Dida in the stairwell while we watched the hurricane from the upper air tower after our shift Sunday morning. And it's funny, the perception of that is they looked at me and go, you live in Oklahoma where a tornado out of nowhere can take out your house, and you may know a bad day is going to be, today could be a bad day, but you don't know if your house is going to still be there at the end of your day or not. And here, I couldn't believe it. They're 4 days out, and they know this thing's going to hit the keys and it's going to do damage to their homes. And it's hard. And Matt mentioned, the landfall and the messaging, and it's still every tornado event I've worked, it's you bear these emotions that come with it. And even though I'm not a full-time employee of Key West, you become part of that community even in a short while, and you kind of own it. And I was really scared for all the people while we were coming up with that messaging. It was tough. I mean, Chip and Chris and I were talking about it as Chris is getting ready to issue his 3rd extreme wind warning of his career. He's now got the most out of anyone in the Weather Service. That's tough. And, we just kind of fight through it. But yeah, Greg's right. I mean, I've had to walk away from my desk before, even in tornado events, and Rick's had to do the same thing. It's difficult sometimes. But, I mean, we're basically a family. And I said we became good friends and roommates in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, no kidding. So did they have you in a hotel there? Is that what you are you staying with other forecasters? What was the situation for you guys when you came into town?
Well, Greg and I were in the same hotel, not the same hotel room, thank God. I don't think the 2 of us could have handled it.
Very, very awkward.
Very awkward. We did share the conference room, but not at the same time. No, we were in a hotel. Mike was in another hotel across town, and the 3 of us were were put up in hotels for the first couple nights, but then we basically had to shelter in the office after that. And my hotel never got power back, so basically just checked out and didn't stay. So. So I mean, it was pretty much, I think Saturday night is when we sheltered in the office, and was noon on Saturday, I think, right, Matt, is when we made that decision. And so basically we all became roommates very quickly.
So Matt, you have one gentleman in your office or your office to be that I'm really familiar with, and that's Alex Tardy.
Yes.
WCM. He is one incredible fellow. We got to do WeatherFest in Anaheim together, and I can't come up with enough nice things to say about Alex.
Yeah, he's a great guy. We actually got to hang out. I'd met him before at conferences, but we got to hang out at the MIC meeting in Minneapolis back in July. So it was a good way to break the ice with him. And I'll be rolling into the office Wednesday morning for the first time. So wish me luck.
Yeah, well, wish you luck with all those fires that are going on out there. You only have like the longest drive in Weather Service history. You're going from literally from the flood to the fire now, so that's not good.
Yeah.
So Greg, I enjoyed meeting your son tonight. James, do you know what he said to me? He popped his head in the test hangout. James Spann, do you know what he said?
What?
Where's all your hair? This is what out of the mouths of babes, James.
The truth hurts. The truth hurts.
I swear, I did not pay him to say that. I did not pay him to say that. He said that on his own. That's my wife's son, not my son. My wife's son.
So, hey, Matt, do you play baseball?
I do not play baseball, but I'm a huge Astros fan.
And they won today.
So here's the deal. So my buddy is Mitch Moreland. And when I see Matt Moreland, I just want to say Mitch Moreland. He happens to be the first baseman for the Red Sox. And I'm a Red Sox guy, so my heart is broken. So here's the deal, guys.
I thought you were an Indians guy now. What's the deal?
Well, I'll be an Indians guy because I like Francona. Hey, guys, so all three of you guys, you were put in a pressure cooker situation. What advice can you give to younger Mets that are just maybe getting into the weather service or broadcast, private sector, whatever, on keeping calm and keeping your focus in pressure cooker situations like that?
Personally, I think, when you feel the pressure really setting on you, if you have the opportunity, is to just get up and walk away for a bit. Take a breather, get a cup of coffee, get some water, get whatever you need to just kind of just relax. Take that walk. You make sure your heart rate comes down. Take that walk. But really, it's going to come down to the practice and just constantly doing it over and over again, being in situations where you kind of learn to how to survive the situations. And you kind of pick up your own little nuances and what you can do to make yourself better and more calm during those high impact, high stress situations.
All right, Jonathan, what say you?
Greg said it best. I think one of the things I've picked up too is that you have to keep everything kind of in front of you. And what I mean is you're going to have a lot of things coming at you at once sometimes. And you sometimes have to slow down, and people get you can get excited sometimes of all these things hitting you. You get kind of locked up in your brain of what I need to do first. And it's okay to take a deep breath. You can slow down. You just have to be able to keep everything kind of in front of you and don't let anything get behind you. And kind of, it's a metaphor I picked up from Kurt Van Sprybrook, who's a emergency response med at Southern Region. He said a lot of things are going to come at you pretty fast at the FEMA RRCC, and I never really thought a way to put words into it, but you just got to keep everything in front of you that you can, and control the things you can control, and the things that you can't control, you just got to roll with it. And every severe weather event I've ever been in, that's the way things kind of roll out. Things come at you can control. Some things you can't control. Just remember to control the things you can.
All right, Matt, what say you?
I think I've got two things, and one is a phrase I like to use with decision support as a whole. Stay flexible and adaptable. You're going to go into an event with a certain expectation of what you're going to be doing. That's probably going to change, and it may change based on a number of factors. Try to go with the flow as much as you can. That, all the rules you have set in your mind, prepare for them to break. The second one is kind of what Jonathan pointed out, is focus on what's in front of you. During any of these severe weather events or tropical events, each desk is going to have a specific role, at least for that day, and focus on that. I think there's a temptation that I have to know everything, I have to know everything that's going on. I have to have all the information, and you know, sometimes that can be too much, and you just focus on you know, kind of what you've been assigned to do in that specific case.
No,
Well, thanks to all three of you got.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
James.
I'm sorry.
One thing I will add, no, I apologize, is, you know, just thinking about it too, is that, you know, a lot of times people think, you know, asking for help, you know, is like the worst thing you could do. But at a point, time comes where you actually need help. Like, you have to communicate, you have to be vocal about it. Say, I need help. I need you to do this for me right now. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not a fault. It actually is a good thing. You know, if you need help, ask for it. Never sit there quietly just to kind of continue doing what you're doing, because you're probably going to fail. So ask for help when it's really, really needed.
Yeah, it's great advice, and thanks to all three of you guys for your service. We've got to, let's see, Aubrey, are you here for a second? You want to do email right now, because I know you got television coming up. Are you ready for email? And if you are, you're nodding your head. I'm just going to play the email jingle because Aubrey is almost ready.
Letters, we get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
And
Unmute.
And the floor belongs to you. Unmute.
I'm coming. All right. Email. I have like 85 tabs open.
Yeah.
Do I not have any? The most recent thing I have is from 9/27, which, oh wait, we didn't do email last week. That's right.
Right. We had no segment last week. So
that's right, because it was such a good topic. So we were all listening. So, okay. So the Washington, the Capital Weather Gang wrote an article about the changing and simplifying of alerts, but only the simplifying of some winter weather alerts. So this should be really interesting this year. It really has to do with blizzard warnings, lake effect, snow warnings, and freezing rain kind of grouped into the winter weather and winter storms. So we expect that this winter. They also wrote an article on a vital hurricane hunter plane that's failed 3 times in the past 8 days and had no backup. I did not read that article.
I bet you one of our 3 guests, they might know is that true, fellas? Anybody know?
Yes. I know. It's true.
Wow.
So it's just it's the only plane they have, and it's not working.
Yeah, it has some
Gulf
issues,
Stream?
but you know,
that what
it's
it
like
is?
20 years old.
Well, it's not the only plane. I mean, there's different types of planes.
Right.
It's one of
Yeah.
the high altitude planes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's one of the ones that does the drop signs. Then it's not the Air Force.
Not the C-130.
It's not the Air Force. No.
C-130.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's one of the G4s, the Gulf 4s.
Okay.
Well, let's lend them ours. Let's just lend them the WeatherBrains jet.
Yeah. We'll give them the keys. You guys can take it for a while.
We can lease it out. And I thought I showed this one. It's still in recent, but there's a YouTube video of Hurricane Irma's eye passing over a home. I swear we talked about
Naples.
that, though.
Yeah.
But
Naples,
in Naples, and that was absolutely incredible. Those, unless I've missed something, those are the only ones that I see. So with that, I will say, if you have any emails, you can send them to email@weatherbrains.com. You can send in your guest suggestions, also with some contact information for our lovely and very busy booking officer, Mr. Bill Murray. He would appreciate that. If you'd like to see maybe a topic done on the show, or if you have any comments about the show or some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Email@weatherbrains.com. Oh, and don't forget the Twitter and the tweeter and the Facebooker.
And after
So
tonight's show, I would
Do we
say
still
Rick is in
Facebook?
charge of all the guests from now on, because he did a great job putting together this team tonight. Thank you, Rick.
By the way, Aubrey, I got some email after doing a double box of the Michigan State game
It's Michigan.
for tornado coverage, but I'm not going to share those emails.
So,
And
were you-
Lot of PG rating on iTunes.
Yeah, let me
You-
tell
were
you.
you-
We've done
double
cut-ins
box?
for the Iowa State OU game.
Let me tell you, Aubrey, it would cure your frizzies.
Straighten the old hair out. Huh?
So did you actually get a chance to do a double box with the game and you, or was it
not a chance? He
Yeah.
was required to.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky. I make the call, and we had a tornado warning, and the deal is if there's a tornado warning, we go on television, and I'm very blessed to have the option of doing it any way I want to, and we actually have other TV stations here, but I opted to go on with a double box, and it invoked some interesting emails, and the social media messages are the worst. What one guy on Facebook sent me a private message. It said "F you" at least 1,000 times. Just blah 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 blah. F you, F you, F you. That's all. That's all it was. Do what now?
This is not Alabama or Auburn. We're talking about Michigan.
Well, not everybody's an Alabama fanboy like you are. I mean, people from Michigan live here.
That many people that are in Alabama about Michigan.
That game did it was doing like a 4 rating.
Only because we were pulling against Michigan to lose.
When the tornado warning hit, it went up to like a 10 rating. You know, people heard sirens or the weather radio went off. And then but a 4 rating's a pretty big deal in this market for a game that's not, one of the local colleges here. So there was a lot of people watching that. So, but I am not going to read those. And by the way, for any of you guys, any of the guests here, if y'all need to hang up or take off, Jonathan, Greg, Matt, you're welcome to do that, but you're welcome to stay. We'd love for you guys to stay.
You made it this far. You might as well stay hanging out.
Right. You might as well. We're almost done here. We've got to take a very quick break and by the way, Brian has been chasing hurricanes, so we don't have a Professor Peters this week. We do have a Tony Rice astronomy report. We'll come back with picks of the week, weather roundup, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
More than 150 years ago, solar mass ejection initiated one of Earth's largest geomagnetic storms on record. Southern auroras were observed as far north as Queensland, Australia, and northern auroras, they were seen as far south as the Caribbean. They're said to be so bright that you could even read a newspaper by the auroral light in the northeastern U.S. These kind of events are rare here on Earth, but they're surprisingly frequent on Mars. Just a few weeks back, a powerful X8 class solar flare spewed charged particles out into space. Here on Earth, the event was barely a blip, registering just a 6% increase in the amount of radiation that made it to the ground. But on Mars, it was a different story. With no magnetic field protecting it and an atmosphere just 1% that of Earth's, charged particles blasted the day side of Mars for hours. Aurora were visible in the upper atmosphere from pole to pole. Now, if an astronaut had been standing on the surface of Mars during this event, they might have seen the sky turn green. With only robots currently populating the red planet, it was NASA's MAVEN spacecraft that captured the phenomenon, recording 557.7 nanometer light, which is much like the auroral light here on Earth. This caught scientists a little off guard, because this is supposed to be a time of quiet for the sun, solar minimum. The Curiosity rover's radiation assessment detector showed readings nearly triple those of normal. An astronaut wouldn't want to be outside for very long. According to Nick Schneider, at the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, or LASP, at the University of Colorado, Curiosity has seen 5 of these ground-level events since 2012. Schneider adds, quote, "They'll probably grow stronger in the years ahead as we move through the solar minimum and return to a more active phase in the solar cycle," unquote. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Let's do a weather roundup here. Again, we're doing the show on October 9th, and we have one tropical system, Ophelia, on the board, which is in the middle of nowhere, basically stays in the middle of nowhere, but expected to become a hurricane. Hurricane season goes through the end of November. But the interesting thing is the big high amplitude pattern across the country. Did you guys see the Denver snow pictures today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of awesome. And their first big winter storm. Of course, it'll be, 70 tomorrow. That's the way it works out there in these early season systems. And Rick Smith yes.
Did you notice, James, there are freeze warnings all the way from northeastern New Mexico all the way up to the Dakotas and Minnesota. Fairly narrow band, but still, that's a lot of freezing weather.
And Rick has been bragging on his dew point in the 40s. And
it's only going to be 70 tomorrow in Dallas when I get there. This is kind of chilly, Rick.
Well, we temperature dropped here like 25 degrees degrees in 3 hours this evening, and it really was. My son came home from band practice and said it was cold. I mean, it's 59 degrees outside now. We're looking for a low of like 44 by tomorrow morning, a high of only, this is as warm as it'll get tomorrow. But then we're back up close to 9 by the end of the week, and it is, like James said, it's that time of the year where it's this roller coaster of temperatures. But eventually the full-time fall weather will be here for a few days, and then it'll be winter then. It seems like that's how it works.
Yeah, but we got this nasty ridge that goes nowhere down here in the deep south for a while, so we're just kind of blocked out from all of that. But let me ask everybody on the panel here, including our guests, thoughts on the winter. La Nina, what does it mean? Give us a winter outlook, somebody. I don't do seasonal outlooks. I'm not that smart. Somebody on this show is smart enough to know.
I do.
So Matt and Jonathan and Greg, you guys know. Aubrey, you know. Go ahead.
I've dabbled with seasonal outlooks, but it's more so, I mean, I've been forecasting for 8 years, so it's more so for me to get, I don't know, practice. I don't do summer outlooks, but and I've actually done a pretty decent job. I don't have a strong feeling for the winter as far as a blockbuster winter. Even if we stay even more neutral or semi-weak La Nina, I don't see a huge blockbuster winter snow-wise, at least for the mid-Atlantic states. So my forecast at this point, without looking at a lot of stuff, would be for a below average winter, snowfall-wise.
Okay. Notice everybody's being silent here. You know, it's like nobody wants to dabble. Come on, guys. You guys have some thoughts on this.
Well, I can almost say there probably will be very little, if any, snow in Corpus Christi. So that makes it pretty simple.
Wow. I like it.
He's running for mayor, I think.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, but down here, La Nina typically is relatively mild and relatively dry as well. So we went through a period right now where we were kind of wet. Now we're kind of trending more towards the drier side of things. It looks like through December, January, February. So we'll see how that shapes up. Again, it could be a very active fire season for us as well, especially if we get some Arctic fronts come down, higher winds pick up. So that could be one of our bigger issues this winter is, the fire threats for us down here in South Texas. But right now, also my dew point down here is 79 degrees. So I think I win on the high side of things. So
got that one covered.
All right. Nobody else is going to play along. That's okay. Nobody wants to play. Typically where we are down here, it's kind of mild and wet for the northern end of our state and dry for the southern end of the Gulf Coast. But, this INSO correlation thing, it always doesn't work out the way you think it is. Just because it happened the last time doesn't mean it's going to happen this next time. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right. I turn into
James,
a witch.
I'll jump in for us.
And while you jump in, let me just say this. I've got to go do television here. So Bill, the floor belongs to you after Rick's assessment of the winner.
Awesome.
Based nothing on INSO or any of those kind of connections or teleconnections or anything. I just know that we've gotten by really easy the last couple of winters here, right, Jonathan? So the law of averages, I say it's going to catch up with us eventually. So, we'll see if it happens this winter or not. But past couple here in the central Oklahoma, especially, we've gotten off pretty easy. So I'm ready for anything.
I fear that it means a fairly active severe weather season for us in the spring here in the South. Greg, you only had Tuscaloosa, Alabama beat by 1 degree on that dew point. You're 79, they're 78. That's representing for Alabama. That's representing for Alabama in July.
I don't necessarily know if I want to beat anybody. It's just just how it is down here, like basically May through December. So it's one of those things where where you take a shower and you get out of the shower and you need another shower because you're already sweating to death.
Yeah,
so that's how it is down here.
There's not a building in Alabama that has that the windows outside are not sweating like a glass of lemonade in the middle of July right now, even with temperatures only in the 70s. But talk about that big downburst y'all had down there in Beeville. I spent Beeville and Harvey, only about 50 miles from you. So talk about that big downburst down there that happened in the summer.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, Beeville, Texas, not too far from Victoria, basically had winds in excess of 90, maybe 100 miles an hour, straight line winds through that downburst. And there's some pretty good hail signatures all off of that storm. I remember actually I was working the evening shift came in early to actually help out with the radar. And we started going to the enhanced wording in the warnings to, to say, hey, like this thing is not a run-of-the-mill severe thunderstorm. Like you're looking at, possibly, catastrophic damage from these downburst winds. And, did a survey the next day, and, there was, several trees snapped in half, poles snapped in half, telephone poles snapped in half. And then, a few, structural damage to homes, trailers, and roofs as well. So that was a pretty big event for us to see that happen. But again, it was a localized area in terms of maybe 20 to 30 square miles that were really affected by it. But as the storm kind of came close to Corpus Christi, which is where our biggest population is, so obviously we were on the phone with the emergency managers, telling them like, this looks pretty nasty. If it survives the way it's moving now, you expect winds, in excess of 80 miles an hour coming through the downtown Corpus Christi area where a lot of high rises are. So that could have been, bad in itself, but it began to kind of weaken as it had, close to the coast. So we kind of got spared in a way, but Beeville and areas like that kind of got pummeled by that storm. So I know obviously you have very, big interest up there, Bill. So,
Yeah, we had a hotel full of people out of Rockport and Port Aransas, and it was very emotional to be there, because I sort of set up shop in the lobby with my computer, sort of giving weather, information to everybody. And we all kind of watched it together through the entire night. And it was very emotional to, be trying to help them the next morning, search out social media and any source just to, they just wanted to see their home. They wanted to see if it was okay or if it was there. It was a very emotional experience. But anyway, these things are pretty terrible. So, Jonathan, I wanted to ask you, you went through some big tornadoes in Oklahoma in your career too, didn't you?
Yeah, there's kind of a running joke with Rick and the guys in the office that bad things seem to follow me. Started in Joplin, and when I worked in the Springfield office, I was on shift that night. I was the meso analyst on duty. And then my first year in Norman, we have May 2013, and we had May 20th, EF5, Newcastle, Oklahoma City, Moore, and then also the Shawnee tornado, which was the day before, May 19th, which usually gets overshadowed, was an EF4. And had Moore or El Reno never happened, that probably would have been the big tornado of the year. I mean, that was an impressive storm that actually went through a mobile home park, and we actually had no fatalities in the mobile home park because they all went to shelter, which was amazing. And then, of course, El Reno, which was a huge event, very large, damaging tornado. Unfortunately, it's the part of the United States we live in, and it's, I guess, why we do our job. Been through a couple rough tornadoes.
Yeah, Joplin. Talk about that experience. Where you were, what you were doing on that afternoon.
Yeah, well, it was my normal. So I mean, it really just doesn't start there. It goes on, but my normal shift for that day was 2 to 10 p.m. and I was a Met intern in that office, so the introductory position. I had to do the balloon launch, but I'd been there for quite a while, or for less than a year, but had worked in the Omaha office while I was in college. So basically, I worked. There were 6 of us in the office, and I can't imagine 6 of the best people to work with in that moment. Andy Foster, lead forecaster there, is probably hands down one of the best lead forecasters I've ever worked with, and probably one of the best in the Weather Service. And Andy was the coordinator that night, and I mean, we knew it was going to be a bad day. We didn't know how bad it was going to. You never know how bad it's actually going to be. But basically, had the mother of all cell mergers over Kansas, and I mean, this thing was just a massive storm. And actually had very little reports with it outside of baseball-sized hail in southeast Kansas. And then when it crossed the border, I mean, Joplin's not very far from kind of that tri-state area of Oklahoma and Kansas. And it developed a tornado right on the city of Joplin. Eric Wise was the forecaster who issued the warning. He had it out. I'm surprised. I can't believe he picked it out of that mess where the tornado actually started and had the warning out way before it got to Joplin. But the issue at hand is just people ask me, was it like what happened here in 2013? And it really wasn't, because you don't have the media coverage. We weren't getting a lot of reports, basically 0 reports on the ground. We didn't really know what was happening. We had one person call in and basically said there's a tornado on the ground in Joplin, but with no other information beyond that. And even the people on TV down there, it was so wide from their tower cam, they almost couldn't picture that was the tornado itself. So it's kind of a mess, really, and really a terrible situation where a very large tornado dropped on the city, basically in the city itself. And on the south side of Joplin, a lot of those homes were built in the 1950s and 1940s. So you're talking about homes that don't have basements. And of course, it hit the high school, it hit St. John's Hospital. But in the office, I mean, trying to get information, the first video we had of anything was Mike Bettis on the Weather Channel. That was the first real live footage we had on the ground of what happened that night. And of course, the days after, we had severe weather every day after that, we had severe weather. So we were dealing with that, and then also just the national response and international response to such a tragic event.
Well, you guys are amazing. What you're doing is just incredible. I wanted to ask you, Matt, real quick before we wrap up with our picks of the week here in a second. Talk about the impact and importance of decision support services to the future of the National Weather Service, and how we are making sure that our emergency managers are communicating that back to our congressional leaders.
Well, I mean, it's the core of everything as far as our future goes. And what you're finding, I've done heavy support. I would say the last 5 or 6 years of my career has been really focused on partner support as much as anything else. And just in these events, I mean, Hurricane Isaac with big winter storm in New Orleans, which was the same day as the Atlanta snow jam. We had a big ice storm down there that shut down the city. Hurricane Irma, the needs, the information that our partners need is becoming more and more sophisticated over time. They need more and more detailed information. Once they know that you can provide that, you're in their pocket. I mean, it happens. So, usually it's just supporting one event. And then they're relying on you for that. And it's especially in the short term. You think about an emergency manager, most of the decisions they have to make are within the first 1 or 2 days when you think about it. Even especially with like severe weather events, winter weather events, they're not going to do a lot of long range planning unless it's something like potentially a winter storm or maybe a tropical cyclone where there's a long time range where preparations have to be made. So it's more and more detailed information in that first couple of days is really where they're needing the help, they're needing the expertise, and I think that's the direction that we're going. And obviously, the level of partnerships as well. Like in Key West, they have very, very close relationship with the Coast Guard and the Navy. I believe that's the case at San Diego as well, where I'm going. And it's non-traditional partners like that that also need our support. And then it's also integrating them into the training that we're doing. So one of the things we did in Key West, and I want to give credit to Weather Service Southern Region, specifically Jennifer McNatt, for helping to put together our Decision Support Roadshow. We actually did 2 days of simulation training in Key West back in April, where we essentially shut down the office. We threw operations over to Miami and we just simulated. We sat down and simulated a hurricane event for 2 days. And what that allowed is some of the meteorologists that had less experience with media, less experience with briefings, they got a chance to do that. And there's no doubt that having that 2 days of training in April made us better prepared for Hurricane Irma. So I think it's going to be more time training, more time supporting events, and a lot more detailed information in the short term.
Well, it's amazing, but after a big event, you find out that something huge like that happened. Jennifer McNatt's a wonderful, wonderful lady and an important member of the NWA Council. And I got to know her when she was the program chair in Norfolk, I guess, for the NWA meeting. And I bugged the stew out of her for the next 2 years until she was like when you see the telemarketers call on the telephone. When she saw my phone number, she wouldn't even answer. But once she recovered from that, we became wonderful friends, and that's an amazing story that you guys did that this spring.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to do that with our all of the Weather Service folks on here can attest to, with our crazy schedules and the amount of operations we have to do and the amount of partner support we have to do. It's very hard to take time out for training, but I just feel like it's critical, and it definitely helped us out with this event.
So when do you report to work in San Diego, man?
Wednesday morning.
All right.
So, yeah, so I'm rolling into San Diego tomorrow and checking into my hotel, and then show up Wednesday morning for a very different weather experience. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's going to be a beautiful place most of the time, as long as you don't have to deal with fires, I guess. You'll be in pretty good shape. So that's great. Well, it's that time of the week, gentlemen. Now that we've lost Aubrey, we've lost our lady in the group. But let's go around the table, the big digital mahogany table, and collect some picks of the week. We'll start with you, Brian Peters, on the far left of my screen.
I'm going to go with the Boston Globe's section. It's called The Big Picture, and in this case it's the impacts of Hurricane Irma. They have a really good reputation, in my opinion, of getting a lot of the impacts, the human impacts of these events, and I think they've done the same with this set of Irma pictures. So that will be my pick for this time.
Outstanding. So you need time to get a little extra sleep and dry out after your hurricane chasing of the weekend.
Oh, yeah. This driving and chasing the rain and chasing the Nate and then working so that James could have some time off as well.
It's unfortunate that we don't have our Nate tonight, because we're missing our Nate Johnson, who would normally be here.
Yeah, I was surprised he kept so quiet during Nate.
Yeah, he was probably laying low, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So Greg, have you had time to scarf up a pick of the week for us?
I did, actually. Something that was passed down to us after Harvey. It's an AdCirc model. It's basically a hindcast, a storm surge run by the UT Austin, and it basically is sierra.cct.lsu.edu, and it pretty much goes through. They run it after each NHC advisor comes out as far as the storm surge goes, and it just kind of gives you a visualization of how the storm basically progressed from advisor to advisory. But also, it's a hindcast, so it actually has a little bit of actual factual storm surge numbers in there too. So it's pretty cool data to look at, I think. Again, for me, it was mostly for Harvey. I'm sure they do it for Irma as well as Maria and Nate too eventually. So.
Well, that's a fantastic pick of the week. Greg, how do people get in touch with you if they want to contact you?
Well, it's simple enough. Email works out really well. I'm usually on there. My wife yells at me all the time for checking my email too often, even when I'm at home. So, but it's greg.heavener, @noaa.gov.
Outstanding. Love meeting your son tonight.
Thank you. And again, that's my wife's child. So, if he offended you, I'm so sorry. But
believe me,
it was funny.
The ship sailed about 35 years ago when it comes to something we're quite proud of, for sure. Thanks for being on the show tonight. Jonathan, anything for you tonight for a pick of the week?
Yeah, so the NOAA geodetic survey is an aerial flyover survey done by NOAA of the coastline, usually, or areas that have been impacted. And they've done flyovers now for Maria, Irma, and Harvey. And so it's a great place if you want to get some high-resolution imagery of what's happening or what has happened during each one of these storms. They use that for a variety of things, for research. And also, I know they use the imagery trying to get the ship channels back open, such as like Galveston Bay and stuff like that. So it's a pretty neat for a gee whiz, but also I know it has a lot of scientific usage as well.
Yeah, that's a nice site.
Matt, you were mentioning the Coast Guard and how important that relationship is. And I know when I showed up, when I pulled into Beeville on that Thursday night at 11 o'clock after flying into San Antonio, I've never been so glad to see 6 big old Coast Guardsmen sitting in the lobby that night. They were there, had been pulled out of Corpus, I guess, getting ready to come back and clear out the ship channel the next day as soon as the hurricane was over. And I've never been so glad to see anyone in my entire life, Greg.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at that point in time with Harvey, it was all hands on deck. So, all the agencies were working closely together. We were doing conference calls, constantly. Again, we had several people, myself, another forecaster, Rob Hart from the office, were deployed to our two big, core partners again, Victoria as well as Corpus Christi itself. So, that was the big one, and you'll probably talk about it more so on your show next week with Tom and Jeff, but. That was the event for the generation of South Texans was Harvey. It had been several, almost 50 years since a big one had hit. So, and this was it. Unfortunately, it came when it did. It was a matter of when, not if, and it happened to happen a month ago. So,
unbelievable. So, Jonathan, any way for folks to get in touch with you in case they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, my email is the best. It's just jonathan.kurtz, that's KURTZ, @noaa.gov.
And thank both of you guys for the great picks of the week. Matt, did you have time to come up with something for us to share?
Yeah, so the picture is actually of Dennis Feltgen, the Hurricane Center Public Affairs Officer at the big hurricane board. But I wanted to point out the article I saw it in, which was one of Dr. Marshall Shepard's entries for Forbes. And it's Imagine Life Without Meteorologists, It's Hard. And it talks about how, most of the public doesn't understand the elaborate nature of our forecasts. And it was a great article, just read it. I think it just came out this morning on Forbes, but of course, easily you can find it on social media as well.
Great pick. Yeah, unfortunately, most people have no idea the complexity of data assimilation and interpretation that we get to do on a daily basis. It's really cool. So Matt, how can people get in touch with you in case they need to find you?
Yeah, the best way is via my work email, which is Matthew, MATTHEW, .Moreland, MORELAND, @noaa.gov.
Outstanding. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you from sunny San Diego, maybe on a nice, calm January day when we're all freezing our tails off over here in the east, and we need a little sunshine. How about that?
Sounds great.
So, Rick Smith, you put this whole show together tonight, one of the best weather brains ever. We appreciate you doing that, and I'm sure you have a great pick of the week and maybe a few comments in closing.
Well, it's easy to have a good show and got great guests. I really want to thank Matt, and Matt's driving cross country, so thank you so much from wherever you are tonight for joining us. And Jonathan and Greg. Greg's working mid shifts, I believe, and Jonathan's has a day off today, a rare day off. So we appreciate you guys being here. Really, 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 really do appreciate it. My pick of the week, since our resident social scientist, Kim, is not here tonight. Actually, she's in Houston, I think, beginning the service assessment process. So I thought I would, since she's not here, I'm going to steal the social science spotlight. And something I ran across today, it's called a cognitive bias cheat sheet. And it's not meteorology per se, but it definitely pertains to what we do, how people make decisions. We hear about things about the optimism bias or the normalcy bias. And this is a kind of a plain language article that breaks that down and kind of explains how it relates to how we make decisions in life. And that includes decisions about weather, evacuating from a hurricane or taking shelter from a tornado or turning around and not driving through floodwaters. So all of it's really interesting. And as we've been hearing over and over for years, we have to understand more about this as meteorologists, as scientists. We have to understand the social and behavioral science side of things, I think, to communicate, to be better communicators. So I think this is an interesting read that explains a lot of those social science terms that we sometimes hear.
Outstanding. That's a great pick of the week. And as we struggle to understand more and more about that sounds like a great reference point. Thank you, Rick, for sharing that. And Rick and I were out at the National Weather Association meeting. Brian was there. And Brian, I've determined that I will never, ever get the foghorn again. If I just hang on to this notebook right here of all my notes from NWA.
All right.
Because it was like a plethora of picks of the week. For sure. And I'm going to borrow one from Greg Carbon, our old friend, who shared the ensemble situational awareness table,
Yes.
which I find really amazing now that I look at it, because you can drill down to your local weather forecast office and look at a variety of parameters and see how those parameters are measuring up from the ensembles against standard issues. And like right now for Alabama, you can see for the next literally all the way out, you can see that we're going to be for 198 hours, we're going to be basically 2 to 3 standard deviations above normal in precipitable water, and that really clues you in that we've got some real potential there for some events. But even by 24 hours from now on the table, we're going to be 3.4 units above in terms of precipitable water. That's just absolutely amazing here in the South. So that's my pick of the week. And got some great guests coming up. Next week we'll be talking about Harvey as Rick's greatest hits continue. He's assembled Jeff Evans and Tom Johnstone. They'll be in talking about Harvey and that amazing 2-pronged event that we've touched on a little bit tonight. Rick, anything else you want to add about that?
No, I think it's just it'll be great to hear from those two guys who work those events, and they, I talked to Jeff and Tom quite a bit at NWA, and they've got some amazing stories to tell and kind of expound on some of what Greg told us tonight about Corpus and hearing about Houston, and so yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, unfortunately, it's been the summer of amazing stories, so hopefully they'll end somewhere here soon. But WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We've been doing it for a long time. We love it. We are at show 612 now. That's just hard for me to imagine, but we have loved every one of them. Every week we meet new people that enlighten us about weather, and that's why we do this. So for all the group that's assembled around the table and those who couldn't be with us tonight, until next week when we talk about Hurricane Harvey, we'll sign off by saying good night and God bless.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all being here.
It was fantastic. Don't have an election to do tomorrow, do you, Brian?
No, I don't. Thank goodness.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Matt, for
thanks
taking
everybody.
busy time to come see us. All right, Rick. Thank you for putting it together.
Oh, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.